When is the last time you walked through places like these, or imagined yourself here? Wetlands, which provide water filtration for us, and are feeding grounds for rare and important wildlife, are being destroyed at an alarming rate around the world. For development, for roads, for convenience. It is a silent battle, and it's happening here in Sydney. Near iconic Botany Bay, 10 minutes from Rockdale Station in Sydney South, wetlands that have been with us for thousands of years now face imminent destruction.
I think roads are important if you've got to travel a long distance.
Because ultimately all we're doing is poisoning ourselves by removing wetlands.
The F6 really is yesterday's solutions to today's problems. It's not a viable solution.
Green space is important, but roads are necessary too, aren't they? The choices we make today will decide what is left to our children and our grandchildren.
Roads or wetlands? We decided to take a closer look. Welcome to this 8 segments report. I'm Tracy Kirkland. The F6 extension has long been on the agenda of the New South Wales state government. Known by various names over the years, it is now on the State Transport Master Plan, which outlines all major transport projects for the next 20 years. But did you know that the current route set aside for the F6 motorway extension actually contains a string of wetlands, the Rockdale wetlands? This report includes some revelations which you might want to know more about before any asphalt is laid.
The F6 extension's proposed route takes it from Tempe in the north, through Rockdale, Kogarah and Sans Souci before it traces south towards the Sutherland Shire. Large tracts of the local area were once wetlands. The name Kogarah means reeds in the Aboriginal language of this area. The only wetlands remaining here today are in this road corridor reserved since 1948. The northern F6 extension corridor is the Rockdale Wetlands Corridor.
We drive to work, we drive our children to sport, we drive to the supermarket. It is the ultimate convenience. We all know what roads are and how important they are to us. But what exactly are wetlands and how useful are they to us?
People don't realise often that wetlands are wetlands. All people see are just simply big fields of greenery. But it's not really until you walk into them that you realise that the ground underneath is quite damp and quite boggy.
You know, the simplest thing is wetlands are places of water. How long can you survive without water?
Wetlands are among the most productive ecosystems in the world, comparable to rainforests and coral reefs. They are habitat for animals, frogs and birds, and they are breeding grounds for fish, including game fish. Wetlands also play a key role in supporting human life. They act as carbon sinks, serve as flood control buffers, and contribute to coastal land stability, among other benefits.
Wetlands have a fantastic function, and one that is really undervalued, and one that we're discovering now is very, very hard to replicate. The main function of wetlands is one of water filtration. It's one of these brilliant systems that nature invented. It's worked brilliantly for millions of years, and humans are now trying to manufacture artificial wetlands and not succeeding anywhere near as well as natural wetlands. For us to destroy natural wetlands is absolute insanity because it costs us millions and millions of dollars to try and replace them. And what we replace them with generally is a very pale imitation of what was there before.
So wetlands benefit humans in a very big way. Perhaps the fact that the Rockdale wetlands exist without any effort or cost on our part is why we might not recognise their value.
The F6 extension is, however, slated to be built over the Rockdale wetlands, regardless of its filtration value. Should we build it? We decided to ask people from all walks for their opinions.
I'm in favour of it, particularly given it's been on the drawing boards, I think, for probably 60 years.
I don't approve of it, you know. Because you ruined the area over there. That's why.
I think it's fantastic. Yeah, traffic's so congested around here and there's only one way to get south.
I think it's great that they're having all the bushlands inside the city, you know, because it keeps the city breathing, and I think it's really nice. I think it's a good idea to have a freeway, on the area, but I don't think they should do it like the bushland.
And so I quite like the bushlands, but the roads around here need upgrading.
For a long time, I've been a campaigner for the F6. Well, I just think that at some stage, one government, either Liberal or Labor, has to bite the bullet and realise that this is infrastructure that's needed.
There are some people who understand very, very clearly the environmental importance of the corridor. There are others who would like to see an end to traffic congestion and are convinced that the F6 will bring that. I actually don't believe that's the case. I think what it will do is put a massive scar through our community and not necessarily resolve the congestion issues.
Another fact you may wish to consider is the history of the Rockdale Wetlands Corridor.
This is the first place to which Europeans came. When the British invasion began in 1788, it began in Botany Bay. And the impact of Europeans has been fairly dramatic. There has been such a devastation of Aboriginal direct relationships and direct presence in that area. Massive building of factories, enormous levels of pollution, the airport, and then the property prices have gone up, so you've had lots of development.
The only exceptions to this wholesale development are these last remnants of wetlands in the corridor.
It pleases me to think that if I was to go back in time, if I had a time machine, and I could walk through this area with some of the Bidjigal, some of the Aboriginal people who actually lived here, that they would look at this and think it's totally familiar. This is what they would remember the area to have looked like when they hunted and roamed through here.
This is a rare situation where a natural location so near Sydney closely resembles how it used to be hundreds of years ago. Do we have a duty to protect this space?
Or do we have a duty to make transport more convenient? All of the traffic trying to get from the city to the Sutherland Shire or to the Illawarra has to go through Kogarah. So in peak hour, the Princess Highway is clogged up. Before the rail cuts to Kogarah, we did have a very good line on the Illawarra line, so it was very easy to get into the city. That's all changed now, of course, and we've seen the results of that with an increase of traffic trying to get into the city. A spokesperson for Transport New South Wales provided the following response. The 2013 rail timetable introduced 149 extra weekly services for customers on the Illawarra line, with patronage increasing almost 10% during the morning peak. In 2008, it took 70 minutes to make this journey, but today it takes around 90 minutes to drive between Wollongong and Sydney. A 2008 NRMA report indicated journey times would be cut by 15 minutes if the F6 extension were to be built. But before we can make a decision to build the F6 extension in the corridor, let's hear more facts. For example, what is the environmental impact of this plan?
A detailed study was done in 2004 by Parsons Brinkerhoff, commissioned by relevant authorities in state government at the time. An environmental assessment was included. However, the then Labor government distanced itself from the report. Let's examine for ourselves the environmental impact of building the F6 extension here. An extraordinary number of birds, animals and ecologies exist in the Rockdale Wetlands Corridor.
The Kurnell Dune Forest community is quite an unusual one, so unusual that it's actually been listed as an endangered ecological community, and so it's listed on the state register.
Through the corridor, the individual wetlands, such as Eve Street, Spring Street landing lights in the north, then Scarborough Ponds, the Hawthorn Street natural area, and Scott Park in Sandringham, have all got endangered ecological communities attached to them. So under the New South Wales Threatened Species Conservation Act, they are listed and identified as endangered ecological communities.
Some of the animals that we get in here are quite interesting too. Probably one of the best known ones for the local people here is one of the small bats. It's an unusual bat because it's a fishing bat. These little shapes flitting across the surface of the water, and every now and then you'll see them break the water. If they feel something, for instance a little fish or even an aquatic insect, they will reflexly grab it and then try and fly clear of the water. Many of the animals that occur in the Rockdale Wetlands Corridor, it is only refuge sites like this that they can really survive in. There just simply are no other remnants like this at all.
Migratory birds are another group that are very dependent on wetlands.
Australia has treaties with South Korea, with China and with Japan relating to birds that use the wetland species such as great egrets, such as Latham's snipe, which can be found locally on those agreements, on those treaties.
Yes, the impact of the loss of the wetlands on migratory species would be even more diabolical. Just consider, for instance, if you're one of these migratory species and you've flown from Siberia to Australia, you arrive in Australia in a considerably weakened condition, and guess what? Your feeding areas are gone. You're not in any state to go anywhere. You're dead.
We've now heard about how wetlands serve functions for wildlife and humans alike. However, transport is still an issue. We sought opinions from our politicians. Duncan Gay, the Minister for Roads from the current Liberal government, didn't respond to any calls from the filmmakers.
In March 2014, 7 Liberal MPs called on the New South Wales government to bring the F6 extension to shovel-ready stage. One of these was John Flowers, MP for Rockdale.
In a statement provided by Mr Flowers, he said, the Sutherland Shire and the South Coast, including the Illawarra, will continue to expand. If any road is to be built through the F6 corridor, it has the potential to integrate road transport in Sydney.
I think that the F6 is a very important piece of infrastructure that needs to be constructed for the people of St George.
The F6 isn't being built for the people of Rockdale. It's being built at the expense of the people of Rockdale.
We spoke to people on the street to find out what they think. Here's how the majority of them responded.
I don't think it's a good idea to build the roads. So no road, please. No road.
It's a shame if it's going to be destroyed.
So I don't really see the need for another road there.
Do we really need more roads? Do we really need more roads?
Look, I mean, the government need to have a look at Google Maps and have a look over that entire area of that green corridor, that F6 corridor, proposed corridor, and have a look at how little green space there is as opposed to residential and industrial.
It's pretty much something that I would say shouldn't be touched ever because it's invaluable. And being of Aboriginal heritage myself, I know a lot about the native fauna and flora and the heritage.
With major roads, everything should be underground. They should just leave the wetlands as they are, preserve nature as it is, and put the freeway underground.
Here's what politicians say about tunnelling the F6 extension.
I support the F6 going under, so being tunnelled.
John Flowers, MP for Rockdale, provided this comment. The majority of calls to the electorate office indicate a preference for an underground F6. Ultimately, it will be a decision on engineering and technical advice.
People say straight away, oh, let's put in a tunnel. I'm not sure how feasible that is.
A former Roads and Maritime Services engineer from the department that makes assessments of roads spoke to our reporter. We asked him about the building of the F6 extension in its current planned route. Here are some of his comments.
We could build it within a 50-metre width. Yes, on-ramps and off-ramps will take up quite a bit more space at various intervals. We could keep pedestrian connectivity, but no, I don't suppose it would help with the wildlife. Yes, we could build it underground, but the rock goes 20 metres deep, so tunnelling would have to be 30 metres down. It would be horrendously expensive.
In fact, a costing from the 2008 NRMA report sets the price of this motorway at $2.2 billion, which would be $2.5 billion in today's dollar terms. This includes a tunnel from Loftus to Sylvania, stopping just short of the Rockdale wetlands. If a tunnel were continued under the wetlands, it would raise the total price again. This is based on 2008 costings, but in 2012, Infrastructure New South Wales identified an indicative project cost of $3 billion for the construction of the F6 extension as a surface road in its current planned route. This cost would be expected to increase over time and be markedly higher for tunnel-based options. Are these the only wetlands facing this dilemma? We spoke to people from 2 other places in the world which were in a similar position.
Saemangam in Korea was once a thriving wetlands. It is no more.
Saemangam is really a devastated landscape now. It's a huge desert-like. We have a lot of legislation, but unfortunately we have special laws that allow areas to be rezoned and even protected areas to be affected by reclamation projects if these projects are considered to be in the national interest.
In New South Wales, once a critical infrastructure project has been declared, there are very limited avenues to stop or challenge such projects based on breaches of environmental and planning laws.
There are many, many smaller sites that many people might say are not so important, but actually have incredible value. So this is a failing of very, very many governments at this time under the kind of short-term economic pressures that they experience and respond to. The wetlands are places of abundance and life. Human societies built up around wetlands. We need wetlands for our survival, as do other species. So wetland conservation should be absolutely the center of any government's plans for the future.
In San Onofre, California, people stopped their wetlands from being destroyed by a motorway by collectively making a stand.
A number of years ago, the toll road agency in California proposed to build a toll road that would have devastated the sacred Native American site of Panhe, which is located in the San Onofre State Beach in Southern California. Reasoning was that the toll road was necessary to ease congestion on the freeways and roads. There were other alternatives, and they were not adequately explored, first of all, and second, the impacts were not adequately analyzed. It wasn't that people power helped make a difference. That was the difference. The diversity of the alliance, ranging from Native Americans to surfers, to mainstream environmental organizations, to advocates for the pocket mouse, to the various state agencies that were opposed to the toll road. This had a huge impact. To this day, nothing else has been built, and Southern California is still moving.
Messages from around the world. But coming back to New South Wales, we must ask what other transport options exist for us here from the Illawarra to Sydney.
There is another clear option if a road must be built. We could use a different route, shown here. This makes more sense and does not join an already congested exit point at St Peters.
$11 million has now been set aside for a feasibility study on the building of the F6 extension, including the alternate route. This is Mr Gay's comment in an article about this study. Other options have also been suggested.
Make public transport the method of transport. I have heard suggestions of a light rail.
There's not a silver bullet that will resolve all of our transport issues. Bus services that run frequently and that are reliable. If there were more commuter parking spots at the other stations, not just at Cogra, and make it free so that people can drive their cars from their home to the train station. That would encourage people to catch public transport.
I think there are alternate routes that the freeway could go, such as going further out through the M5, then coming back through the back of Menai and joining onto the F6 through that route, rather than actually going at all through this area at all. It's just no need, and it's a very, very beautiful area, and it's a shame to lose that to infrastructure.
Now you've heard all the opinions and all the facts. Wetlands serve as carbon sinks, flood control buffers, and help with coastal land stability. The Rockdale Wetlands filtration function keeps the water in Botany Bay clean. The Rockdale Wetlands Corridor contains 5 endangered ecological communities and 2 endangered species at least, and migratory birds are dependent on wetlands like those of Rockdale. The price of the motorway is at least $2.5 billion and could be a lot more. Transport is still an issue, but besides the F6 extension, other options to move people between Sydney and the Illawarra have not been seriously investigated. Should we keep the Rockdale Wetlands Corridor or replace it with a motorway? What do you want for future generations? This is Tracy Kirkland from ELTV.
You can get further information and images on our website. You can also tell us what you think.